Hey guys, I'm Billy with SpecTrain. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bit of an unusual video today in that I'm not actually going to be doing any shooting at all in this video. This is about ammo and actually reloading, because the question that I'm getting so much right now is, hey man, ammo prices are getting kind of crazy. Should I get into reloading? I'm going to try to answer that question. Let me say up front, I am not an expert in this, as in I do not work in the industry. I don't have a bunch of different reloading machines. I can't tell you about all the different ones and their pros and cons, but I do have a system that works for me really well. I've loaded tens of thousands of rounds of ammo, and so I'm just going to give you my perspective on getting into reloading and maybe give you some information to think about in terms of whether you should get into it or not. Now, I'm going to be talking about this specifically from sort of a high volume pistol shooter perspective. Personally, for me, I do not reload rifle ammo. The number one cartridge that I shoot for rifle is going to be 5.56 223, and it's just absolutely not worth it for me to reload that ammo right now. If you reload something, if you shoot a lot of something like 300 Blackout, or even like 300 Win Mag, or another Magnum cartridge, something like that, it may be worth for you to consider. But I'm mostly talking about pistol rounds today. And so, should you get into reloading? Obviously, can I reload ammo cheaper than I can buy it off the shelf? Yes, I'll get into that. Can I make ammo that's better than what I can get off the shelf? Potentially. But these days, there's so many companies are making really solid, good ammo. Think about companies like Outdoor Dynamics, Atlanta Arms. Even if you're looking for something like specific for competition, there's companies out there that are doing that. And so, if you're just looking for quality ammo, I probably would not invest the time and the money into the setup to get better ammo. Even your defensive loads, right? There's pretty much anything under the sun that you could want. So the question is it worth it for me to get into reloading for the cost savings? And this is where I'm going to go through some of this information right now. So when I'm getting into reloading, chances are the component that I'm actually saving money on is brass, right? So the actual spent casings, you can reuse these. And obviously, if you buy brass ammo off the shelf and shoot it, you can pick those casings up and then reload them. Or you can just go to your local range, especially if it's an outdoor range, something like that, and probably just pick spent casings up off the ground and use those. You can go to a local match and pick casings up off the ground. There's places where you can buy, buckets or drums of brass fairly affordably, and you can reuse that component over and over and over again. Eventually, there's a life cycle, but typically, I don't see myself running into that issue very often for me personally. So that saves you a little bit of money, and of course, you're saving sort of the labor cost, if you will, from the big companies actually running the rounds through their machines and what they kind of charge for that. So you're going to save a little bit of money, but still, right now, for me, my loads are running me about 15 cents a round. 15 cents a round, and I'm reloading them about as cheaply as I can. I'll run you through some of the components that I use. So these are the primers that I'm using right now. This is a very inexpensive foreign primer, but I have had pretty good luck with them. I buy them, 20, 30,000 at a time. So it's not like I'm using Federal Gold Match or some really expensive primer. I'm mainly using this stuff right now for my powder. Tight Group is decent. It's not the cleanest burning powder by far, but it performs pretty well, and it's generally available, and it's fairly affordable. And then, of course, I'm using, just Blue Bullets. I'm not gonna pick up a huge case of these and show them to you. 147 grain Blue Bullets. That's just a polymer-coated lead cast bullet, which is about as cheap as you can go. And still, that's all combining to cost me about 10 cents a round. So how does that compare? Well, it depends how that compares to some of the other ammo that's on the market. There have been times in the last decade where you could actually buy factory ammunition just a little bit cheaper than that. It wouldn't be nearly as nice or as pleasant to shoot as the stuff that I reload. I'm talking about, things like, maybe Winchester White Box or whatever that isn't super reliable. So what I am doing is I'm able to load ammunition that is of the highest quality very, very, very affordably. And so that is nice. But here's the thing. When you get into it, a machine like this is a Dillon 1050. It cost me about $3,000 with the machine, the case feeder, the bullet feeder, and all that. So it's going to take you quite a while to break even on a setup like this. So as an example, current ammo, I just looked on AmmoSeek today to see what the cheapest stuff that's on there is. Shipped, it's about 30 cents a round is what I'm seeing. So you would have to reload 20,000 rounds of ammunition just to break even on your press. Some of you guys might do that in just a few months. Some of you that might take years, right? So whether or not this makes sense for you is going to depend on how much ammo you run. Let's say you want to get a little bit pickier and you want new brass case 147 grain bullets. as an example. Well, those are running about 34 cents a round, so that would be 15,000 rounds of ammunition. Let's say you wanted something higher end like Syntech, 41 cents a round, so that would take about 11,000 rounds of ammunition. So you're at the very least, you're gonna have to burn 11,000 rounds of ammunition before you even break even on a machine like this. And so, depending on how much ammo you are actually running, you're gonna have to make that calculation. Is it worth it? Now, you would say, well, couldn't I get something cheaper? The answer is yes, right? So you may be able to see it's kind of out of frame, but down here I've got a Hornady single stage press. I've got this set up actually to pull bullets. But the main difference that I want to talk about really quickly is the main different categories of press and why there's such a difference in price and which you should probably go with. A lot of people are going to recommend that you go with a single stage press to start with, and it's not a bad option. They're way more affordable. You could probably get all in on a single stage press setup for maybe, $800, something like that. A lot more affordable than this guy. However, the time you're going to have to invest to load a lot of ammo on a single stage absolutely skyrockets. Something like this, I can load in excess of 1,000 rounds an hour. So although I don't have a ton of time to dedicate to reloading, I can go down one evening and take an hour and reload my 1,000 rounds for the week, and I do pretty well in that sense. It would take me, I don't even want to think about how much time it would take me to load 1,000 rounds on this single stage press. To explain the difference as clearly as I can, there are multiple things you have to do to every single casing in order to turn it into a bullet. So if I take, a casing like this, that's just been spent, I'm gonna have to decap it, right? I'm gonna have to resize it. I'm gonna have to, if I want to swage it, I'll have to do that. I've then got to prime it. I've then got to put powder into it. I've then got to put the bullet in it. I've then got to seat the bullet. I've then got to crimp the bullet. On a single stage press, all of that is only one of those things is happening for every time that I pull this hammer. So I would have to take, let's say, 1,000 rounds of this, and if I just want to decap it, I've got to pull this handle 1,000 times just to do the first stage. Then I've got to pull it, let's say I'm doing it really simply, and I'm just going to priming now. I probably can't even prime, or I wouldn't necessarily want to prime on this particular setup, so maybe I have a hand primer or something else. I'm gonna have to squeeze that 1,000 times to prime the brass. Then I'm gonna put the powder in it, and I'm gonna have a separate powder drop. So now I've gotta pull the lever on that 1,000 times to get powder. You see where I'm going with this. 6+ times I'm gonna have to pull this handle before every single one of these cases is gonna get ready, and there's gonna be reshuffling and moving around in between each one of those steps. And of course, for each one of those steps, I've got to take this die in and out, make sure it's set up properly, and there's more chances for things to go wrong. On my 1050, right, there's 8 stations. So there's 8 things happening all at once every time I pull the handle on this 1050. So as soon as I pull this handle 8 times, from then on out, every single time I pull that handle, a completed round is coming out of here. So in other words, to reload on this machine 1,000 rounds, I have to pull that handle 1,008 times if all goes well in order to get that 1,000 rounds. So it's not unfair to say it probably takes 10 times longer to load using a single stage than it does on the progressive press. Now, the single stage might be great for folks that are wanting to be really, really careful and pay a lot of attention. Say you're into precision rifles, something like that. You're trying to carefully load 50 rounds a week or something like that. Maybe the single stage will work out well for you. But if you're trying to load, 1,000+ rounds a month, in my opinion, the progressive press is 100% the way to go. This is not a skill escalation thing. If anything, I think the progressive press is easier and less technical to load on because you do not necessarily have to check each and every one of your dies every single time you go to do it. You just have to set everything up, lock it in, and you're pretty much good to go from there on out. Yes, you may run into issues from time to time. You may have to troubleshoot things. Parts are gonna wear. There's some basic maintenance you have to do. But for the most part, once you get it set up, you're good to go and you can just run through it. So if you're a high volume pistol loader, me personally, I would recommend you start with a quality progressive press, something like the Delrin 1050 or 1100. You get a case feeder, which is gonna automatically load your cases for you. You get a bullet feeder, which is gonna automatically load your bullets for you. And from there on, you'll be pretty much good to go. The only other thing that you're gonna need other than this setup, is some way to do primers. So typically the way a lot of folks will do it is literally take a tube like this. They'll sort of spill the primers out into a tray, and you sit there and peck 100 times to pick up 100 primers, and then you dump it into your machine. To me, again, that's just an untenable amount of time that it takes to deal with the primers. What I use is this Vibra-Primes. This is a little vibrating gun. It's got the flip tray built into it. You dump your primers in, get them all situated. You stick your tube in the bottom, tilt it, pull the trigger, and it basically just shuffles all the primers. They fall in here, and then you dump it in. Way quicker to do primers. This is a very cheap little tool that is worth its weight in gold, in my opinion. You're also gonna need some way probably to clean your brass. This may not be 100% necessary. In other words, if you pick brass up off the ground, is it possible that you can reload it and be totally fine? Yes. But if you're obviously got dirty, gunked up, corroded brass, like it's just not necessarily going to feed as reliably. And so I certainly recommend getting something to clean your brass. This is all I use. This is a basic tumbler from Frankford Arsenal. It's filled up with corncob media. I dump, 300-400 rounds in here, let it run for 4 to 6 hours, and you're good to go. So, should you get into reloading? It's up to you, man. The last thing I'll leave you with is, if you're picking a time when ammunition is really scarce to get into reloading, you got to remember that components are probably pretty scarce as well. And so primers are the biggest thing that we see that are constantly unavailable during times of hoarding, if you will, around elections, that kind of thing. So have a look before you dive into it. Make sure that what you need to get into reloading is actually available. And then keep in mind that if you're going to get into reloading, you probably want to stock up big time on those components. Because every time you change out a key component, like bullets, powder, and or primers, you're going to have to redo your load development, meaning you have to make sure that you know mainly how much powder, but also how deeply to seat those bullets and so forth, to make sure that the pressures in your firearm are not dangerous, and to make sure that it's cycling the way that you want, it's feeding the way that you want, and there's no issues. So if you're buying, let's say, a pound of powder at a time, as an example, and then you are, looking for it, and those are not available anymore, that particular kind of powder is not available at the moment, and you buy something else, you're gonna have to completely redo your load development process, and that could actually end up costing you money, because you're gonna have to burn ammo, not training, but burn ammo doing that load development process. Highly recommend that you do have a chronograph on hand as well. Get something cheap, Caldwell or whatever will work just fine. And you can use that to do your load development with. But the point being, it's probably not worth getting into reloading right now, in my estimation, unless you are ready to shell out the money, not only for the full setup, but to actually stock up on a significant number of components, which is primarily what I mean by that is primers and powder. Bullets tend to be more available from what I can tell. They're way easier to manufacture, and you don't have those hazmat shipping charges as well on your bullets. So you can stock up on those on sort of an as-needed basis more easily. But those other components, I'd recommend stocking up and having a good supply well in advance. So if you're ready to do that and dive into reloading and you actually have the time to do it, then reloading may be something for you. But hopefully this was some basic information that helps you guys make that decision. If you got questions, I'm sure you will. Probably find somebody who knows more about reloading than I do and can answer those questions. But if you do, drop them down below. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.